Hey everyone, thanks for being here for our Beginning Again retreat. And we're going to complete our retreat with a conversation about what's next. And I think Kathy really set us up in a really nice way for thinking about what is next. We just finished up a conversation about thinking about what's lost during caregiving, and we just really made that pivot from it's not about a loss, it's about a change. And we can't necessarily visualize the change being completed until we have time after caregiving ends to really reflect on, okay, what is it that I want now? So let's think about what's next. Okay, so just really piggybacking off what Kathy showed us in a spreadsheet. And if it's in a spreadsheet, it is true, right? It's not just fiction, it's fact, it's data. There's wisdom and insights that you've gained during caregiving that can help you now. I think sometimes we think, oh, what I used during caregiving is what I used during caregiving. It's actually what I use during caregiving is what I keep with me as I move into what's next. We carry it with us. What's interesting is Kathy was asking us about our life before caregiving, and I was going back in time before I actually started helping family caregivers, and I didn't like who I was because I was someone who was struggling. I hadn't connected to my purpose, and I didn't like that about myself because I felt like I was frivolous and silly. So I didn't spend a lot of time with Denise before caregiving. I felt like I connected in a much better, powerful, vulnerable, authentic way once I started working with family caregivers. And I think maybe that's how it could be for you when you think about who you are during caregiving. We are much more comfortable with vulnerability because of our caregiving experience, because caregiving requires vulnerability. I was explaining this to someone recently about how I connected with my mom once she accepted that death was coming, is that I felt like she trusted me with her vulnerability. She gave it to me. And then I felt like, wow, can't believe she trusted me with her vulnerability. Well, I'm going to take that and take care of it. So we know how to do that in relationship with others. When someone is vulnerable, we know how to be there with them in their vulnerability because our caree has trusted us with their vulnerability. I mean, wow, amazing, amazing. We talk about the family members who might have been missing in action during our caregiving experience. We understand that they missed out. But I think when we understand what they missed out on, we can treasure what we were in on, which is this receiving of vulnerability. I mean, wow, wow. I just think what a gift that we were given. What a gift. Okay, so this acknowledgement of our gifts that we receive during caregiving, which really are the meaning of life, can help us as we think about what's next for us. And knowing that there is a next for us. And Maureen talked about that earlier today, which is the next is for us. If you've ever looked at my concept I developed in 1997 that I've revised and tweaked and really focused on making it a reflection of today's caregiving experience, it's this idea that there might be 6 stages of caregiving. And after caregiving ends, we're still in the 5th stage because that's a transitioning stage. There's a transition before our caree's death, and then there's this transition after our caree's death. And I think about the transition after our caree's death as lasting as 2 years. So before our caree's death, we have to transition from doing to being. We're not going to schedule a lot of appointments with specialists. We're not going to battle death anymore. We have accepted it, which means that we be with our caree in a different way. For instance, we have conversations about our death. We talk about the truth with our caree about their death. And then the transition after caregiving is around finding our next steps, our footing, after caregiving ends, because caregiving ends in a minute. And we know it's coming. We don't necessarily know when, but we know it's coming. And then when it happens, we realize we can't go back. We have to keep moving forward because we can't get back our caree. We see the finality of life when there's a death. And so our next steps are about ourselves, because ultimately this caregiving experience, which feels so much about our caree, is until it's about ourselves. And that transition after a caree's death is about our life. Because we have this wisdom that we've gained, we want to live our life in a different way. We want to stop smoking, like Maureen talked about. We want to do the things that are hard for ourselves to give ourselves this better life. One of the things that I did when my mom was alive was I joined her church guild. And I did that because I wanted her to continue to attend the monthly meetings. My mom's church guild includes members who are in their 80s and 90s. And so I'm the youngest by about 30 years. So because I'm one of the younger members, when they needed a new co-chair for this year, they said, Denise, will you do this? So I am a co-chair for my mom's guild, although my mom isn't a member of it anymore, but I feel connected to her by continuing this activity. And I will also say that the guild provided me with a level of support that was truly beautiful as my mom was dying, because they were in reality with what was happening. So they would send my mom cards, and it was always, we are praying for you. We know that you are loved and supported. It was never a get well soon card, which would have really just driven me nuts. So they were just so honest about end of life. I found that quite powerful because it gave me a level of support. So anyway, so I continued to go to these guild meetings. And at our guild meeting in September, we had a priest come to talk to us about how he recruits new priests into the church. It was fascinating because he has a process. What he does is he connects with young men who are thinking about the priesthood, and he has a program that lasts maybe a year, and he really focuses on 3 different categories. I found that fascinating. And so what I thought about was, how can we use that to figure out our next steps after caregiving ends? So I've changed the wording and I've changed the meeting, but I want to let you know that this process is inspired by someone other than me. I just took what he did and I actually thought, wow, this can really help us as we think about what's next. So he used 3 words, and I've changed the 3 words to think about capacity, completion, and zest as we think about what are our next steps after caregiving ends. What are our next steps after our retreat ends? Okay, so let's start with capacity. Capacity, I think, is around what's possible given the reality of this day, this week, this month, this season. After caregiving ends, your body might be exhausted. So as you think about your next step, when your body is exhausted, what's possible really revolves around rest. So what's possible for the rest that you need? What's possible to help you sleep through the night? Caregiving, especially at end of life, is very intense. And so our body might also be sore. So for me, soreness shows up in my lower back. And after a particularly stressful time, my lower back is very painful. So what's possible for me when the stress has settled in my back and my my body starts screaming at me, stop, take care of yourself. Then I think about, okay, so what's possible when I know my body needs attention? And a particular part of my body, my lower back, needs my focus, needs my care. So my capacity when my back is really sore is around how do I take care of myself? So as we recover from caregiving and as we start to feel like we're better rested, our body is recovering, we can think about what's possible when we feel better. What's possible around our energy level, the time we have, the resources available to us, and even our budget. So it's a process around the steps we take as we think about what's possible. Because what's possible for you tomorrow might be different than what's possible for you today, we can go back to Heather's presentation and really think about our authority. Our authority can help us figure out our capacity. And it also can be possible to think about our authority and as it relates to our capacity as we're thinking about the upcoming holiday season. What's possible for this holiday season, given your energy, your time, your resources, and your budget? And then that capacity might change at the new year. What's possible now that the holiday season is behind me? My body is recovering even more. I feel more connected to what life means for me right now. What's possible given my energy, time, resources, and budget. Again, capacity changes as our body recovers, as our life moves forward, and as the seasons change. So that's capacity. So next steps include a reflection around capacity. And again, capacity, I believe, is around what's possible. If helpful, you could also think, what's realistic for me right now? And then buy into that whatever's realistic is realistic for you. I also think during this transitioning stage after caregiving ends, we are closing out caregiving. So this idea of completion is around the business side as it relates to closing out caregiving. It's also around the emotional side. What is possible around completion as I think about my grief, reconciling my memories, my relationships, my day. What's your work that needs to be completed? And again, it's the business side of caregiving and it's the emotional side of caregiving. What do you want to complete? It could be relationships that you reconcile. It could be regrets that you release. If you'd like to share in the chat room around the work that you want to complete, I'd love to read about it. So in my earlier presentation, I talked about my mom really coming to terms with her relationship with my oldest sister. And after she had seen the priest and had actual active reconciliation where she talked about her sins with the priest and then the priest forgave her, we talked also about how she would work through this relationship with my sister. And we finally decided that she would write a letter to my sister. So that Tuesday morning I told you about where my mom woke up and said, what's on the agenda? That was one of the items on the agenda. So I wrote down what my mom wanted to say to my sister. I had my mom sign it. My mom could barely sign it, but I wanted my sister to see that my mom signed it, that these were her words. And then we sealed it, and I still haven't mailed it to my sister. Okay, so that's work that I need to complete. So I'm going to put that in the mail to my sister this week. I'm not quite sure why I held on to it. I suppose I held on to it because I was holding on to my mom, and I'm ready to release that letter and send it to my sister. So it could be something that seems so simple, but actually is quite complicated that you want to work through and complete. What's the work you want to complete related to your your caregiving experience, your family, your relationships? Okay. And then the third word is zest. In positive psychology, they talk about well being. And zest is a word around our well being. So when I think about what zest means, I think about it as it relates to these 5 questions. What work excites me? Kathy talked about the work that excited her, which, if you say about it in one word, which is grief, you think, wow, how could someone be excited about grief? But she was excited about grief and how she could support individuals through their grief. She was very excited about this and turned it into her next career. What work excites you? You could also think about, who do I want to work with? And it could be work again as a very broad term for, who do you want to spend time with in a meaningful, purposeful way? What do you enjoy talking about? What are the conversations that you think, wow, I love it when we have a conversation or a discussion about this? That's zest. What conversations leave you wanting more? You are intrigued by what else you could learn, what else you could share, how else you could connect. And then what's the difference you want to make? It could be that you want to make a difference in your neighborhood. You might think, I want to make a difference within my family or within my friend circle, or you want to make a difference in a different type of work, working with family caregivers, for instance, or thinking about working with young adults. What's the difference you want to make? And here's why this is such a powerful question, because you made a difference during caregiving. You understand that you can make a difference because you already did. So rather than thinking, I'm just one person, how can I make a difference? You could see that one person makes a huge difference. And now you want to think, okay, how do I want to continue making a difference? Because I know I do. Earlier, I talked about the meaning of life. I will tell you that's really the meaning of life, isn't it? That you know you can make a difference, that you can leave this world in a better place. You can leave the day in a better place, meaning how you show up in the day for others means the day is better for everyone. So yesterday is better because you were a part of it. Amazing, isn't that? Amazing. And because you know you make a difference, you show up in a much more intentional way. You show up in conversation in a different way. You show up in support in a different way. And that idea of being intentional in your day, which changes the day, means that you change your life. So we often think about, well, how do I change my life? Well, we change our life when we change today, and that changes our life. How do I change another person's life? It's how you show up in their life today. That's how you change their life. Because you saw that in caregiving, because you saw how you showed up in the day changed the life. Okay, so in our certified caregiving consultant training, we have these tools that we call wheels. And we use these wheels as conversation starters. And what happens is sometimes we get caught up in so much that we can't focus on what's helpful. So this next wheel helps us think about, what are the next steps for us. This is not a complete wheel in terms of opportunities for you. It's just a place to start. So for instance, your place to start might be, you know what, I'm just going to spend a little more time healing my body. And that's a good place to start. You might think, boy, I really missed having fun during caregiving. It just felt like I worried so much. I felt the pressure of my responsibility so much that I wasn't as fun as I wanted to be. Now you feel like, you know what? I'm going to have some fun. It could be that you want peace in your day, peace in your relationships, peace in your heart. So maybe what's next is creating peace. Something that Heather shared during our podcast, and I'll actually share the link to the different podcasts we did with the presenters you met today. She talked about how after her husband died, she did everything that everybody says don't do. So her decision after her husband died was based on, I'm just going with what feels right for me. And it worked out that it was all right for her. So you might be thinking about decisions and which one is the right decision. And you decide, you know what? I'm going to make a decision that I believe is right now. And then I'm going to revisit it next week, next month, whatever it might be. You can also decide that what's next for you is love. And you can decide what type of love is next for you. Maureen talked about self-love. You might decide romantic love is next for you, or loving friends are what's next for you, or having a pet in your life is what's next for you. And then it could be that you think, you know what, I really want a purpose. And your purpose each day might be creating peace, focusing on healing, having a little fun. Our purpose doesn't have to be huge every day, and it doesn't have to be just one purpose every day. John Maxwell wrote a book about our different purposes in life. I can't remember the name of it, but if you look up John Maxwell, you'll find the book. And he says that we have this incorrect assumption that we have one purpose in life. And the reality is we have many purposes in life. And we also have different purposes for different relationships. We have a different purpose, for instance, for a different time of day. We might have a different purpose depending on the day of the week. So our purpose during the week might be very different than our purpose over the weekend. So you could start to think about, well, what's my purpose for today? And then see what answer comes to you. Okay, so if you'd like to share in the chat room what stands out for you in the next wheel, that would be awesome. So for me, what stands out for me right now, especially because we talked about love earlier in my presentation around my brother, that was so helpful for me. What's next for me is love. That's what I really feel like I want and need. And I feel good knowing that. I think that's the other piece of it too. It's our authority for ourselves, as Heather described earlier, gives us the words we want and the true emotion behind those words, which is, yes, I want this because I deserve it. So as you think about your next wheel, it's, oh, I love that, Maureen, the idea of joy. I want joy because I deserve joy. When I post our archive, I'll include our PowerPoints, and so you'll see the next wheel is part of the PowerPoint. And it's an easy reference for you to use on a regular basis. So you might get up in the morning and say, I'm not sure. And then you could look at the next wheel and say, okay, I don't have to decide today. I just want to create today. So I'm going to do a little baking, do a little cooking, and that's my creation for today. I want to mention that there are additional resources on our community, which is called caringourway.com. So if you're interested in pursuing some courses that are free around Beginning Again, you can look at our 6-class course called Beginning Again After Caregiving Ends. We also have a flashlight camp. I talk about how I felt like God flashed a light on my career that became working with family caregivers. And I talk about how There's a flashlight moment for you, and let's figure out what it is. In addition, there's a writing course where you get writing prompts to help you heal after caregiving ends. And then during the month of November, our certified caregiving advocate course is free. If you want to just take that, it's 1 hour, and that can help you figure out what's your passion and purpose if you want to continue working and supporting family caregivers. Okay, and I think we'll close with Maureen's thoughts in the chat room. She has the authority to create more joy in her life. And that's really, I think, a beautiful sentiment for all of us to remember. We have the authority to create more joy in our life. Okay, thanks everybody for being with us. If you're here live with me, hold on for just a minute. I'll share a couple updates in the chat room. For those of you who might be watching the archive, the recording, thank you so much for being here. And keep in touch. We have events that happen regularly, including events for those adjusting to life after caregiving ends. And you can join us on caringourway.com to stay up to date on all those events. Okay, thanks everyone.